Hello designers, we are here today to talk about our very last project. I'd like you to think of this as your thesis project. It's your one project at the end of the year that's showcasing everything that you have learned over the course of the semester. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on something hopefully you are very passionate about. We're going to be making posters and merchandise. And we are going to look specifically at gig poster art and protest poster art. But first, a little bit of review before we go on to this project description. As a reminder, with this project and in the final exam, should you have to take it, there is a heavy emphasis on the 6 elements of design: line, shape, color, value. We don't technically have form, we have the impression or illusion of form, texture, and space. Those are the 6 elements. Think of them as the ingredients. Remember, they are present in every design, whether it is good or bad, that those 6 elements are always there. They're the only tools that you really have as a designer. What you're trying to make with those tools are the principles. There are lots of different principles, and they do vary based on who you speak to, but these are some common examples: balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, rhythm, and unity. Lots of these terms should sound very familiar to you. But for us, the ones you absolutely have to know are the 4 most important as they relate to graphic design: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Remember, contrast is big differences in those elements. So dark versus light value, squares versus circles, smooth texture versus bumpy texture. It's that strong contrast. Repetition means repeating those elements. So repeating the same colors, repeating the same types of line, repeating the same shapes. Alignment has to do with lining things up. The most obvious is when you're talking about text box alignment. So you have left alignment, you have center alignment, and in some cases you might have right alignment, and then that super rare one, justified, where it stretches across both left and right equally. But more importantly for designers, or I should say as important, is the alignment of elements on a page. And you can see it here. See how as the designer created this graphic, they lined these sections up with this here, which lines up with this here, which lines it back up with this here, this aligns here. So all of your different elements, whether they are text boxes or graphics, they all line up. And then the last one is proximity. And the easiest way to think about proximity is groupings. You need that negative space to tell us what are the different sections. We can tell there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 separate groupings on this one document. It all looks cohesive because they're, again, repeating elements like color and shape, but they are using that space to give us the indication that they are somewhat separate. So what I want you to do now is I'd like you to stop this video. I want you to locate this slide presentation that should be attached to this assignment in Google Classroom, and I want you to watch this short video on the history of modern posters. You may stop at the 3-minute mark, as that last portion of the video just talks about the business specifically that created the video. So as I said, for our poster design, we are going to take inspiration from 2 different sources. Both of them have lots of emotion behind them, but for very different reasons. The first that we're going to highlight here is protest art. Now, protest art is nothing new. If you've ever been to a protest, you might have seen people with handmade posters. But lots of movements have paid graphic designers to create designs for their movement. Okay, this is nothing new. Governments have done this. What I'd like you to do now is I want you to stop this video and play this video here and then come on back. Okay. So as you see here, we've got our formal definition of protest posters or protest art. This is often underground or outside or in nature. Okay, again, lots of them are handmade. They are typically in posters or billboards, but they do come in a variety of sizes, and every different kind of movement uses them. This is not to be confused, though, with propaganda posters, as you learned about in the previous video. The artist that we're going to look at for inspiration as it applies to protest art or social movement art is Shepard Fairey. So again, you're going to stop this video, locate this video that's embedded, and watch this very short video on the artist Shepard Fairey. All right, welcome back. Now that you know more about Shepard Fairey, let's take a quick look at some of his works. Most recently, he has been using his background in art for the women's movement. Okay, I do not propose or promote any social issues here in class. I'm just picking one that is very prolific. You can see his work everywhere. He's very famous. So again, please do not take this as me trying to instill any ideas. We're using him purely for his design style to showcase how you can use art and design for social justice reasons, for whatever that movement may be. But you can see here, it's a coordinated campaign. So there is repetition within the design, but then within the different designs that he's doing as part of this larger package of graphics for this movement, they all have repetition in them. He's still stylistically handling the images, the text, everything in the same way by repeating colors. You see common shapes that show up even in how he handles the illustrations themselves. Another artist that I want to highlight, again, not pushing any agendas on you, just so happens that both of these do tend to be what would be considered left-leaning issues, is another group of artists called the Guerrilla Girls. And I want you, if you want to, not mandatory, you can watch this very short clip about, and it's not about, it is an interview of current Guerrilla Girls, because you will learn if you watch the video that they have changed over time. These are anonymous. We do not know who they are. They are famous women in the field of art, but they disguise themselves, and it's kind of like a secret society. They pass down their place in this group of women to younger female artists as they kind of rise up through the ranks. But the point of what they create with their art as these anonymous artists is work focusing on the lack of representation of women in art and in the art field. That's as much as I will say there. But kind of interesting if you want to dig a little bit deeper.
My next guests are a group of All
right, and that brings us to something far less controversial, but also still deals with emotions, and that is gig posters and silk screening. You can think of them as fan art. Gig posters is a very large conglomerate or umbrella term given to artists that make posters specifically for music venues. Now, we are not going to limit ourselves to just music concerts or venues or artists, but we're going to take inspiration from them. So again, you're going to stop this video. You're going to locate the video that's embedded in here that's going to introduce you to the Flat Stock, which is a annual showcase of poster artists, and it's paired up, this one specifically is paired up with the South by Southwest Festival, so you can learn more about that there, and then come on back. Okay, so you've seen a lot. You saw how artists, specifically gig artists, used very traditional old school methods to create mass-produced posters of something that they love, because most of these posters are often not even commissioned by the bands for these concerts, and they do take some references from previous works that the artists have put out. For instance, this is a Foo Fighters poster. The artist used the logo that Foo Fighters used, but everything else is their style. It's their interpretation, their illustration for this concert. Gig posters are highly collectible items. I myself am a collector of those, and maybe I might be persuaded to bring some in to school to show you. We, unlike the gig poster artists, though, we are not going to be using silk screen. We are going to be using all digital methods.
The ultimate thing of...
All right, we have Jay Ryan here. I am not going to force you to watch this video, but Jay Ryan is a somewhat local artist. He's outside of Chicago. I've met him several times, and he's very well known for his own specific style. And that's what a lot of gig poster artists do. Just like Shepard Fairey, who had his very specific style. When you see his work, you can identify him. You know it's him. Jay Ryan, again, he's kind of very locally famous, at least within the art world. But you can tell his style. He has this style of hatching and cross hatching that he uses, and he almost always has these weird little caricatures, which are kind of bear-like, kind of cat-like, kind of squirrel. He kind of creates his own kind of ideas. But if you want to know a little bit more about Jay Ryan, we're just using him for some inspiration. Watch this video here. It's a short interview of him. So what we are doing in this unit is you are going to be creating a poster and buttons. Now the slides will say buttons/magnets. We do not have the components some years for the magnets, so you'll have to check in class whether it's buttons and magnets, but it's one or the other. But you are going to be creating a coordinated package of merchandising. So a poster along with the buttons. Yes, you will get it printed. It will be a large scale. It will be your biggest poster that you get printed, and you will get the buttons or magnets. We do have a press in class. We will do those during class time. As I said, you will do one poster, and then you must do 4 different designs that show some continuity or repetition. So they should look like they belong with the poster, but they are not exact copies. My suggestion is taking elements of the poster and just making copies of those and reworking them in different ways. Once you do get ready to start, make sure you locate this template because it's going to give you the dimensions, everything you need. You will notice again we have that safety line, which is a red line, where you should not have text going outside this line. Your design can come all the way out to the edges, but text should stay within the red. Same thing here. These are your buttons. You can have your design go all the way to this outside. In fact, I would fill it all the way to the outside, but I would not have anything super important outside of this red ring. All right? Here's the criteria of what you must include in your poster. You have to have type in it. Now it can be handwritten or it can be typed, but it must be 2 different font styles and it should show contrasting font. So you're showcasing your understanding of a contrasting font. It must contain an original illustration. So you must do it from scratch, or the majority of it from scratch in Illustrator. Now you can use the tracing methods that we've learned, but just know that I am going to be grading you on difficulty level. So if you're doing something that's super easy, obviously that's going to affect your grade. It does not have to be portraits, but it can be. The subject matter for this is either a protest poster and buttons and magnets, or it is a fan art base, so similar to gig posters. And you can pick any kind of famous person or movie or whatever you want. So either you're doing fan art or you're doing protest art. You pick one of the other. This is why it's a passion project. So if you're passionate about a cause, do it about a cause. If you're passionate about a movie or a music artist, do it about that, okay? You have to have, this says 3, it should be 4, okay? I'm updating it, I want 4. You have to show unity between the poster and your buttons, okay? You can see here, some of them are straight up copies. They should be different than your poster, but they should look unified with it. You must show an understanding of good font relationships. You have to show me that you understand how to use the Illustrator program. And then of course I'm looking for good application of those 4 most important principles: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. And then you have to use the template file that I just showed you. What I'm going to look at when I grade it is procedures. That's, did you follow directions? Was it turned in on time? I'm going to look at your craftsmanship and effort. I'm going to look at the difficulty level and base that on your skill level and the originality of it. Yes, we're going to start first by looking at other artists' work, but your design must be original. You cannot copy somebody else's design. I'm going to look at your composition, which is the use of those 4 most important principles: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Unity between your elements. So again, that goes back to the repetition. Your use of the Illustrator program, use of the type, and showing me that you understand how to create a good type relationship, those good contrasting types. And then this one is probably going to be the most challenging. That's, how did you as an artist use the elements to communicate? I want you to think about this back to your DEAs. You should be doing some level of abstraction, okay? Whether it's changing colors, adding extra line or texture. you're illustrating whatever it is, whether it's a portrait or a landscape, you're doing it in such a way that it's helping us understand the feeling or mood behind it. So think back to your branding unit when we talked about shape and color psychology. If you need to look through your GDAs, or hey, ask somebody else to flip through theirs to get you ideas, how can you illustrate stylistically this idea that you're passionate about? Whether, again, it's a piece of fan art or it's protest art, that is up to you. Contrast is really important in posters. Typically in design, we say that you don't want your center of interest dead set in the center, but honestly with posters, you probably do. You want one big graphic, okay, one big dominant element. You don't want lots of little things. Now, there's always an exception to every rule, but for most of us, I want you to think about this as high contrast. Why would you want it to have high contrast, like something really stands out to your eye? Okay, yeah, because posters are out in the public. It's competing for your attention with lots of other things, so it needs to be really bold and in your face. Doesn't always need to be bright colors, but it has to have strong contrast so it jumps out to your eye. Super important in posters, contrast. Another principle, it's not of the four most important, but this is one of those other principles that's going to be important as it relates to poster art, is the principle of scale, or sometimes called proportion. Scale or proportion literally means relating things by size, okay? So you see here, they're experimenting and exaggerating this scale here. This is a smaller one, this is much bigger. So in poster design, typically one image is dominant, like I said, so that's that scale and dominance that we just talked about in contrast. One way to do that is through your scale and proportion of having one big dominant element in the center. Unity, okay, that's basically repetition. It's just another way of saying repetition is going to be super important, not just within the design itself, the poster, but also in how you relate it back to your four buttons or magnets. One final tip or suggestion, it's not a principle, but it's something to think about. Because we are dealing with posters, and posters are typically hung just on the paper themselves, not in a frame typically, you may think about actually putting a visual frame, which is like an outline of some kind, or even you can kind of see here how they use the text as a frame. Sometimes posters just need some kind of an edging or a matting, so adding a simple element of line on the outside. And as we go forward and look at these examples, I want you to notice that lots of these designers use a frame when it comes to posters. So what I'm going to show you here is some past student work, and I'm telling you what their grade was, so you can kind of base what the expectations are. So this is a former student, obviously about LeBron here. C-level work. It's good. It's almost a B. Why? Well, because honest, he didn't give me 4 different designs. He gave me 3. He didn't give me 4. So it kind of, the difficulty level got him there. Also, all he really did, and again, I'm watching you in class time, is he found a photograph of LeBron online, and not even a really good high contrast one in my opinion, and he just image traced it. And then he added the bucket and a simple graphic in the back. It's not bad. It is kind of visually striking, but some of those other elements, he's not using his space well. He also didn't fulfill, you have to have 2 different pieces of text in 2 different fonts. So that's where some of the points were that were docked. Oops, let me go back. This was B minus. Again, gave me only 3 instead of 4. But the biggest issue here was that they were using simple photographs in the background, and their buttons were not cohesive with the poster. I felt that, especially this one, other than the illustration, it looks very, very different from the poster. And as you know, he didn't really do much different with the arrangement on the buttons themselves. Didn't really experiment. It's kind of too repetitive. Okay, he's not showing me some variety in my options, because that's the point of this. We're creating merchandise. We want to give options to our customers, so to speak. But one reason he got a higher grade of B is because he actually went through the added extra step of he made stencils that he spray painted on a piece of paper. So he did think back to when we did the image tracing and created stencils. He created 3 separate stencils. He layered them, he actually spray painted them, and then we scanned that image in for him to use. and then he created these kind of like stacked cards. So high difficulty level. This one's B plus. All right. Again, why he didn't get an A? For one, he used two different fonts that are conflicting, not contrasting. Notice they're two script fonts, but they're not the same font, so he got some points docked there. Also got some points docked because I didn't feel as if he varied his buttons or magnets up enough. They were very, very similar. I really want you to play and try different things within those, still making it cohesive, but showing me that you have some variety. But he did get some points for difficulty because he created a pattern using text in the background. He did do this by hand in Illustrator, okay? And then he had a pretty good illustration. This is A level, all right? Notice how they did change up. Yes, it's still the illustration, but notice they changed the color on the illustration. Sometimes it's multiple colors, sometimes it's one color. They did lots of different things in the background. They changed the scale. Notice on this one, they put the UR here, they didn't. So even though this one is somewhat similar, they did show a lot of variation within these. High difficulty level, because again, this student did do a stencil, just like the last student did, layered it on. We then scanned it, but then they made everything else from scratch. Okay, protest poster here. This is another A-level work. I highlight this one because this student wanted to do a little bit more than they had learned in class in Illustrator, and so they went online on YouTube and found some additional like Illustrator lessons. So I gave them more points for going above and beyond, and as you can see, they did tons of different, because they really got into this and they wanted to create a bunch of different options for their buttons and or magnets. All right, so where you're going to go when you get back in class or whenever you can, the first step is research. That's always the first step as a designer. You're going to look at other artists' work, and what I want you to do is I want you to use a Google Doc to copy and paste a minimum of 10 different posters that you like. When this is done, you will share it with me, let me know, and you will have to cut and paste those into your sketchbook. This is something we've done before, but the first step is always to look at other artists. Now, like I said, you can steal ideas. You can look and be like, oh, I like how they did the 3-color thing here, or I like these added a little elements. You can take pieces or inspiration from other artists, but yours should still be an original design. So I've got lots of different colors, but I want you to notice how they are making stylistic choices, how they're abstracting colors, maybe how they're simplifying shapes, maybe how they're adding texture. You can do your poster and magnets on anything you have a strong passion for. So again, whether it's protest art or it's just a musical artist, that's fine. You can do handwritten font if you so choose, but I would pair that up excuse me, with a font that is generated in Illustrator. This one did not have text, but I wanted to show it to you. I think it's a really good example. Now, you can use photographs from the internet if you are manipulating them. Obviously, they did a lot of work over this. You cannot just take a photograph and place it on here. No, 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 no. We are doing illustrations. We're not just doing graphic design placed with photographic images. You have to create the illustration. Now, you might rely on a photograph to help you create large portions of it, but it should be your illustration, not simply a photograph. You can do it on a movie. Maybe you absolutely love a certain movie. You can do that, or a book. Maybe you're really into a TV series. Again, think about the feel. These both have very different feels because of the way they've used those elements. You can do hand-drawn portions either in Illustrator, or you can do them on paper and we can scan them in too. That's fine. Just notice how they paired the hand-drawn elements with what is clearly done in Illustrator. It's so that we understand, hey, this was meant to be kind of raw, childlike, it has a hand-drawn element to it, but we've paired it well and it's well designed, so we understand that that's the intent. It's not just a poorly made poster. You can also think about creative and interesting ways to incorporate your text into your graphic. Here's a couple examples of protest art. You can come up with a hashtag if you would like. Really push yourself to think about how you're going to use this space, especially because posters are a little overwhelming because you will end up with a lot of negative space. And you have to ask yourself, how am I going to fill that? Now, you don't have to fill it. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to have everything in there, but you may want to think about how do I add some graphic elements to keep my eye traveling or flowing throughout the composition. Once you have printed out your 10 or more examples, you are ready to start. Make sure you find the final project template. If you have not finished that advanced illustration video, you obviously need to do that first. All right, get to work, designers. I can't wait to see what you come up for your last passion project.